I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly. I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man.
Hey.
You are missing the opening ceremony to the Olympics.
Is missing the right word?
Not an Olympics guy.
I just don't care. Is that a right way to say that? I don't care.
I think that is the right way to say it.
Okay, good.
I'm getting the updates from Kelly on what I need to YouTube later.
Oh, sure.
And I saved 4 hours, so
There you go.
We've been doing a deep dive into the instincts. These are the 3 social energies that all of us possess. If you want an intro to this, look at the first 5 episodes. Apparently we had to spend a lot of time introducing this topic.
It's a big deal.
But now we are shifted into second gear.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that's been one of our metaphors, so I'll come back to it. But we are talking about what is often called the sexual instinct. Some people will call it the one-on-one instinct, bonding instinct. TJ and I prefer the pairing instinct. But this is the hot instinct. This is the, as he said, the risk-taking instinct. And all of us have this instinct. All of us can connect to other people one-on-one in a bonding way where they are our focus. And when our Enneagram type overlaps with this one-on-one interaction, a lot of times there's really great things worth talking about. In fact, we just did a recording with Beth McCord, and she had identified herself and her family according to not only their type, but their dominant instinct. And a lot of people who really get into Enneagram elevate the instincts to almost that level of saying this is their type or their subtype is the language. TJ and I don't do this. We think that the instincts are more like gears in a car that we get comfortable with and that we prefer, and especially given the territory and terrain that we need to navigate in our life, we kind of settle into some of those gears as our favorites. But however you come to this, when talking about the sexual bonding one-on-one pairing instinct, it's incredibly important. So,
yeah, I think we talked a lot about the we have previously talked about the self-preservation instinct and the idea of, like, evolutionarily speaking, the self-preservation instinct keeps your person alive, right? Like that your energy goes toward keeping you alive.
Yep.
When you move into this sexual pairing instinct, this is about keeping you and me alive. The other person, like what do we have to do to sort of propel the species forward? And oftentimes this comes with a little bit more energy. It's less about preservation and more about some type of movement, of growth, of change, of like, because if it worked to just stay where you were, then you wouldn't have to move into this pairing space. If it worked to be alone, you wouldn't have to pair with another person. If it worked to stay as you are, then that's just preservation. And evolutionarily thinking about this, like there's movement, there's a catalyst, this needs to be something that causes change, that has a level of intensity and energy that when types are in this instinct, this is something where they need something a little bit more, you know?
Just as we did with the self-preservation instinct, we're going to just highlight 4 big themes that we think carry across all 9 types when they engage this gear. And so anytime somebody might talk about, a sexual 3 or a sexual 8 or the rest, this will apply. Again, for TJ and I think we all have access to this gear, and it will come out at times. And I think, like, this one actually is one of the gears that we really can see in the same way we saw self-preservation, that it has clear places that it comes out, and it's probably in the intimacy that we share if we have a lover.
Yeah.
As a species becomes more developed emotionally, intellectually, we tend to choose partners that are different from ourselves, that are complementary. And those complementary aspects have huge evolutionary value.
Right. The fact of procreation is also there's a reason that this instinct is called the sexual instinct. Like, procreation requires a level of intensity and connection that is good and valuable for our species, for us individually.
Yep.
There is a level of intense connection and intimacy that takes place surrounding the act of procreation. And like that's a risky thing.
Yeah.
It can create life, and it can also break lots of other things.
I suppose said a different way, if you can't be emotionally intimate, vulnerable, expressive with another person, then this is like a great sign to, again, your biology, that you're probably not going to make good parents together.
I'll probably bang this drum over and over again, but we're not exclusively talking about sexual partners.
Yep.
And it's just that's not what pairing is. It is included in pairing, but pairing, Jeff and I have a deep and intense relationship where we are like this instinct is heavily involved in our relationship, and neither of us have any desire to have sex with each other.
Right.
So like that's not what this is always about. It's about the connection with another. It's about sharing yourself and your life and your space and having some kind of connection with another person.
These tools can get employed in other places, apparently, that are not procreative in nature.
Right.
You might be birthing other things, as we talked about, like you're birthing a podcast, birthing a business. There's countless great examples in pop culture of duos, as it were, who are doing something together that's very important. And I imagine, I have no idea what the biology is on this, but I imagine that a lot of the psychology that's taking place probably comes out of the skill set that was there early for procreative purposes, but now it's used for other purposes. It's used across the board.
Yeah.
So this would include that deep connection and intimacy is going to include problem solving. Oftentimes when you feel like you need to solve a problem with another specific person, you're probably shifting into this gear, into the pairing sexual gear. So this happens for me, like with my parents. I need to solve a problem with my parents, and that's a very one-on-one, intimate, vulnerable, expressive kind of place, right? It may be the case that I blow past all boundaries in that space. It may be the case that I'm actually pushing for intensity and engagement in that space. Mm-hmm. And all of that are going to be characteristics that we see with this instinct.
Right.
So the first big idea here is deep connection with kind of those ideas in mind. The second is that the sexual pairing instinct really elevates risk. When we talked to the fine gentlemen at the Art of Growth, they really wanted to push this as kind of the primary for sexual subtypes. Mm-hmm. You're risk averse for the most part, but there's all sorts of times where you have to shift into that gear and say, nope.
Right.
For the sake of the things that I really want, I need to risk some stuff. Yeah.
Right. And that's when we're talking about risk, there is a level of uncertainty about the outcome. Emotional vulnerability is risk. There's a lot about that word risk that is not just danger to my physical person risk. There's risk expressed in all kinds of ways, and we'll play this out a lot when we go through all of the types, but particularly thinking about like the way that our passion, our sin folds into these instincts, and like risk comes with it and like combines with that thing, and it's often, risk is often just going against what is normally comfortable.
Yep.
And it can be as simple as me speaking to another person when normally I wouldn't, you know?
Yep. Risk, in my mind, especially relationally, because these are social energies, risk is about being more assertive, being more bold, taking some chances there. It can be, just to build on what we said before, it can be a place of, again, emotional vulnerability. It's the coming across hot in relational connection with a single person. You are the starter in that situation for the most part. If you're engaging this instinct, oftentimes the energy is coming from the person who has more of the, has engaged the pairing sexual gear to start the things moving. The other big thing here is it seems to me that it is very risky to be authentic, to put forth your authentic self. When we were talking about self-preservation as a gear, we highlighted that image can sometimes come up as a protective measure, that those who are in self-preservation mode will often put forth an image so that they can kind of hold some of their self back and preserve themselves. This is flipped here. With the pairing instinct, authenticity, again, vulnerability, emotional expression, that's going to come out in this space with this gear. So if it's go time to say, no, this is how I really feel, you're pushing into that gear, and that's risky for many of us.
Right. And like there is no like one size fits all for any of these categories. Like particularly thinking about authenticity for 2s versus authenticity for 4s. It is risky to be authentic for 2s because what if you're too much? And it is risky not to be authentic for 4s. The risk involved in that authenticity idea is different for each type, but it's still like that is part of the calculation of what risks am I taking, how am I presenting myself. Image is a problem for 4s, and they don't want to present an image ever, and 2s are not tied into themselves necessarily, so being authentic might be too much for another person. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about that idea through around the whole circle.
That's a good call. And in fact, we're going to hit 2s and 4s today, so we'll highlight that.
Great.
Third big idea I have is the desire for impact, and that can come across as a desire for impact in relationships. That can come across as a desire for impact in shaping and changing the world. Again, the hot energy is here. There are often heightened emotions that come out in reaction to the world itself and wanting to move it or move the person in front of me. The desire for intimacy can come across as I want to connect with you, and that means like, that can be an engagement that has a lot of energy and power behind it. So energetic exchange, vibrancy in our interactions. If you're in this gear, that's obviously probably not true of all of us all the time, but that is true of us some of the time. And that's the point.
Yeah. And we're starting to see that all of these categories can sort of interplay and intertwine with each other and feed each other. And like if you were in a place where you were instinctively looking for intensity and connection, and you're willing to risk your safety, your peace, your whatever in order to gain those things, then you want that to have an impact. Like that, it just makes sense that part of this would be wanting it to mean something, wanting it to change, to move, to grow, to push, to like something is moving forward in this.
Yep.
And if it's not, then there is no impact, right?
I suppose, again, to go back hundreds of thousands of years, risk, desire for impact. This is birthing children often have those two things in mind,
Right.
Or if there's intention behind them. Lastly, I got personally charismatic, compelling, and the use of charm. If you shift into that gear of I'm charming the person in front of me, I'm seeking to elevate my charisma for the sake of winning, wooing, getting the attention of, connecting with the person in front of me, then that's this gear.
Yeah. There's a sense of, like, if you're trying to attract a mate, you need to do something to make yourself attractive. And that, I think, this will be much more meaningful when we get to fives, but like fives are not necessarily charismatic, but the thing that they are projecting, the way that they are trying to draw other people into them is by exposing the thing that they actually care about, right?
Right.
So they're looking for a fellow nerd who's going to go deep with them into the subject that they're interested in. So they're going to broadcast their deepness, right?
Yep.
Putting on something that draws other people to you will be fed directly through those main motives of each type.
Total side note, like characters kept popping up for me as I was doing the study, and Hannibal Lecter was my sexual 5. Like,
love it.
In terms of just, I was like, who is this person? It's like, that's this person. This is gonna help me formulate my idea. So as you were talking, I was like, yep, that's how that works.
I mean, he's magnetic.
There is definitely that I am seeking to pull you in close, closer. Those are my 4 themes. We're going to start this time with the sexual ones. We started with the self-preservation instinct in 9s, and here we'll start with the sexual instinct in 1s because this is my dominant instinct. I feel like I live in this gear more often than not, and so this doesn't mean that I'm necessarily bonding with my lover all the time in this space. It does mean, however, that my desire for impacting the world, I'm often quite emotionally exposed and expressive in nearly all of my relationships. I'd much prefer, again, these kind of pairing interactions, and we've said this a bunch, but I would prefer to have one person in front of me who I can interact with, and when it gets beyond that, it's a little bit more tricky. I have, of all things, have noticed this most severely recently in the fact that I went from 1 dog to 2 dogs. I don't know how to parent 2 dogs because it's now a society. I would focus on the 1 dog and be into their thing, but 2 dogs, too much for me.
Yep. Forget the other one exists.
It's more that my mind becomes a buzz with too much, you know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You're being pulled in 2 different directions.
Yeah. Just too much going on and I don't know what to do. So especially because
it's
they're
not
so
always sexual partners. Sometimes it's dogs.
Right. The thing that hits me, so I want to start with deep connections and intimacy. 1s are going to come with some zeal, going to come with some intensity, and that's going to come out in their relationships, the sorts of relationships that they establish and the endeavors that they seek to grab. There's a much more, I think, with 1s in this gear, there's much more of a focus on connection and even influence. We've mentioned this a handful of times. Are you on my team and are we going to build something cool together? For 1s in this gear, they are processing the world through what they create and accomplish and do. And oftentimes the relationships, as we've said many times, pretty much form around that for this kind of one in particular. It's I'm here to improve the world, and I'm looking at you and what are you doing, and is it matching up with what I'm doing? And if so, man, we're gonna ride that energy. And if not, I'll shake your hand and wish you well.
Right. That connection piece, like 1s who are in the world looking to be good, to be better, to make things better. There's a drive here to pour a lot of that energy into someone else's good, oftentimes, right? And like we are building something good together, but we are building it because it will make us both better. It'll make the thing that not only our relationship will be strengthened because of it, but like the space in which we inhabit will become better because of it, because of this growth, because of this movement. And Yeah, and oftentimes these ones, like in that desire to improve things, like the project is the other person.
Yeah, and that's the other side. That would be a second way this is expressed.
Yeah.
But but that's as you were talking, was like, oh yes, and there's the other element, and it's that this instinct comes out as the motive comes in, and it's I need to improve something. Well, what do you need to improve? Well, I'm having a conversation with this person in front of me. Probably they need their life to be elevated.
Right. And I have a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise on ways that you can make your life better. So here, take all of everything. I'm going to lay it all out for you. Here's the steps that you can take to become a better human.
Two different things there, and it's really worth naming. Is one is I'm pairing with another person who's probably has complementary skills, but we have similar ambitions and similar targets, similar goals, similar. This is what we want to achieve. I'm not necessarily trying to improve that person. In fact, I love finding people who are really great at things that I don't have to. I can give them their space and take my hands off. But oftentimes the other thing emerges of, what are you into? Are you into business? Are you into philosophy? Are you into sports? And then the conversation starts. And it's like, oh, you should read this book. Oh, have you listened to this podcast? And there's the conversation style becomes, how do I offer something that will move this person forward?
I think we've talked about this before on the air. I bought a house in 2018, and Jeff and I had many conversations over the course of my wife and I looking for a new house about what was the right decision on how to move forward with housing. And Jeff had a lot of things to say about what was the right move for housing. And it was entirely filtered through your understanding of how real estate market works, especially as an asset for long-term financial goals.
Yep.
And there was so much wisdom in what you were saying about that. And the reality is we needed a house so that I didn't have to live where I was anymore.
Right, sure.
And rent was too expensive. So the best option for us was buying a house. But the desire within that exchange is I want to see you make the best decision possible for your financial future. Here, let me tell you everything that I know about this, and encourage and push and like this is what you should do, because also ones are idealists, right? And so much of those conversations was about wanting me to make decisions that made my life better.
Quick background here, all of my wisdom was spot on, holds 95% of the things that I said, TJ, were just true gold.
Yep.
There was 5% that was trying to look into the crystal ball and see what was ahead.
Yeah.
And TJ was right to forgo my advice and move ahead, because I was totally convinced that if he was going to buy a house, he may lose a bunch of money for a little while, and he just needed to be prepared to lose a bunch of money for a while. And actually, that's still great advice. If you're going to buy a house, you should be willing to know that you might be 20% upside down here in 5 years. If you can be in that spot, do the house. And good news for TJ, his house tripled in value in the next 4 years.
Right. So we live in Colorado, and 2020 happened. So it just changed everything. I can't move because I can't afford to move, but my house has increased in value. So, and this is just this whole conversation it's a great example of the intensity, the assuredness with which Jeff comes to this topic it's big. He is very confident that he knows what he's talking about, and he wants you to know as well, because he wants your life to be better. This is when ones are in this sexual instinct place, they are sure that they know how to make your life better.
I'm sure we're going to cut 5 minutes. And the reason we're going to cut 5 minutes is, one, I'm sensitive to criticism. And so I had to come out and say all sorts of things. And dear ones, this is where the sensitivity to criticism from others may take place because you're being authentic, you're putting out your vulnerable self, you're giving your best work and seeking to pair. And when criticism comes back, that like you have thrown a big left hook and now you're open to getting hit.
Right.
And that can be very personal. And so for ones who have that, I suppose for many types actually that engage sexual instinct, imagine that if you're sensitive to criticism, it might come across here.
Sure.
Boom. One of the things that comes out in a lot of ones like myself that are dominant in the sexual instinct is that we value openness and vulnerability as a good. This is how you ought to be in the world.
Right.
Why? Like it's the deceptive side is like, well, that's a moral failure, isn't it? Like you ought to put out yourself. And that can get us in trouble.
I mean, it is a level of intensity. It is part of that deep connection. I want you to know my true self. It is also like that idea of proactively preventing negative perception of your decisions, of your behavior. Like that is so many things that have to do with that connection, with that intimacy, with authenticity is important in this sense because you need to know that I don't have an ulterior motive behind this.
As has been said in the past, because ones don't want to have a lot of junk inside of them, for some of us, we're just spilling that out. It feels a lot better to just have it out there. Just so you know, here are all my faults.
Right.
So that's that first deep connection, intimacy, comes out a bunch here. A second overlap is the risk-taking, which, again, we've kind of talked about. But one of the things I think is I routinely see in the literature something that I push against, and it's that ones are rules followers. I am not a rule follower.
Right.
I break rules all the time with assertive zeal. You know, this does not apply to me. And so one's shifting into the sexual energy, the pairing energy, that's where that is taking place. There is an assertiveness and will and the desire for control. And I can get out of your silly rules through my moral justifications, which I've become very good at advancing. And so if your rules in my mind, heart, and the rest are seeking to trap me, control me, and especially if they're trying to harm me, I can simply dismiss the rule and move in a different kind of direction. That is a risky way to go, especially in, a society that's based on rules. But I feel that impulse quite a bit.
And this is one of the places where it's really interesting to think about that word risk, because for ones, when you take the type of person who is idealistic and black and white thinking and a lot of the stuff that we just associate with ones, and you bring the sexual instinct into it, there is a moral imperative to do the right thing regardless of the rules. That can be part of the, like, I'm telling you how to better your life discussion. Like sexual, when ones are feeling that pairing energy, it may be a really dangerous place for them to stand up to power, to nail 99 theses to the door of a church,
It's like a good illustration.
To even tell the person across the table from you something that they may reject, but you feel, the one feels the moral imperative. It's actually riskier to them to not follow that instinct than it is to put themselves in that kind of danger.
You'd be a bad person if you didn't tell so-and-so.
Right.
They need to get their act together.
So what I see as wildly risky sometimes in that, like, entering into the conflict space, for Jeff, it's actually riskier for him not to do that. Like, the entering into that conflict, he does not see that as risk.
Right. Another example of this is that some ones in this space are actually even going to pump themselves up and see risk taking as good.
Right.
We're going to listen to podcasts about risk taking. We're going to, read books.
Yep.
And a lot of it's going to be justified by the end and the target. If you have an idealistic end that is worth your one and only life, why wouldn't you sell everything you have?
Right.
To grab that.
Right.
The one that's going to be catnip to people like myself. So as has been said on this podcast a handful of times, I do commercial real estate investment, and in the last 3 years, I have more debt now than I've ever made in my life by threefold.
Sure.
Like the amount of debt that I have would take my entire working career to pay off 3 times. However, I have some grand ambitions. I have some fairly clear targets, and the numbers make sense to me, and X, Y, and Z. And so since the numbers make sense, because I have these clear targets, because this is what I want to do with my life, where's the paper? Did somebody say they would loan me the money? Done.
Right.
And I'm able to blow past risk and the weight there. I have shifted out of my self-preservation space, clearly, and I've put it into this gear.
Right.
And we're going to do something amazing. And that kind of moves into the third big idea, which is impact on the world. But did you have any thoughts on that, on the risk side?
Well, I think even folding in some of that impact idea a little bit, ones are often the type who will stay to finish the job when everyone else has left to move on to something else, right? There's a completion necessity. Like you haven't finished until you've actually finished. And when we're talking about these kinds of risks, it is also risky to be the only one who's finishing the job.
Yeah.
And when idealistic ones, step into large risk, they will follow it through to the end.
Right. The last big endeavor I had, I remember a handful of times having to say, I already understand that I'm going to be the person to turn the lights off here.
Right.
So let's just jump to the chase in terms of our conversation, because we all know how this plays out. I will be the one left hanging with this problem.
Right.
And
not because you want to.
Right.
But because it is a moral imperative.
Yeah, this is just how this is going to go. And and I knew who my partners were. So and I knew the hole that I had dug. I had dug a hole for myself. This doesn't always happen, but I certainly was willing to be the person to turn the lights off.
Right.
But so it's not risk taking does not always end well, apparently.
Right.
Sometimes you can hit a wall. So, but deep in my core is this third thing: is I desire an impact.
Right.
I far would rather have an impact on other people in the world, etc., than to have something like a comfortable existence.
Right.
Like this is the place that I just shift into that gear. Happiness for me looks like impact. Happiness for me sometimes looks like a comfortable existence where minimize problems. But really, when I say like what do you want the rest of your story to look like? It's probably going to have a lot of movement and energy.
Yeah.
And the improvement of things that I care about.
Yeah.
Comes out of this gear.
And this is we're talking about part of the what's the word we like? Earning, reactive.
Sure. Yeah, both of those.
Yeah. This triad, 1s, 2s, and 6s, a lot of their processing is done outside of themselves. It's the verbal processing. It's needing to know that the thing that you've created works before you know whether it's a good idea or not, right? Like the working it out in real time, in like seeing the fruits of your labor, that is whether you know the labor is good or not.
Right.
And so impact being part of this instinct is like it draws on so much of what goes on with ones anyway. Like that there needs to be some type of thing that has been created, that has been very clearly moved from point A to point B or whatever else it is. If it has not changed anything, then I probably didn't do it right.
Right.
You know, like that.
Yep.
If there isn't an impact, then why make the effort in the first place?
Improvement almost always requires a ton of energy.
Right.
This happens in the world itself. It also happens in relationships. I'm routinely delighted when I get in a fight with 8s who don't realize that I have extra gears, and they shift into the gear where they think this is where the conversation ends.
Right.
And I jump to the next gear and push them hard.
Yeah.
And because I actually desire that vibrancy in the interaction almost as much as they do.
Right.
It's actually very seldom the case. I can't actually remember the last time I really had a conversation that hit the levels that I just thoroughly enjoy. That's just way too loud, way too intense, but just that I can't live in that space, but I do enjoy that space, maybe once or twice a month.
Yeah.
But that's a desire for impact and connection.
And emotional vulnerability is risky, right? And furthermore, thinking about ones who need to be good and need other people to see them as good. And emotional honesty is dangerous for ones because you may come across as not put together.
Yep.
And this desire for an impact, this instinct for change and growth and movement, like thinking about that, the way that ones are normally like in other spaces when they're not tapped into this instinct, it's much more likely that ones are going to be overly controlled in their expression.
Yeah.
That is a good person is someone who is moderate in their emotional expressiveness, right? And then you get into this instinct, and part of having an impact may require you being more emotionally expressive.
Right. This brings up the countertype in part, and it also brings up the passion, which are both these go together.
Yeah.
Anytime the word countertype comes up, it's where the Enneagram type doesn't quite look like itself. And sometimes when we shift into one of these gears, it stops looking like itself in terms of the, what would you call that?
The outward expression, the visibility of it, the behavior.
This Instagram post doesn't make sense given your behavior. You can't be a 1, that sort of thing. The caricature, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Ones are not the type to get rowdy at a bar.
Right.
But sexual ones having a really intense conversation with a close friend, they might get a little rowdy at a bar.
The anger comes up. So ones are a body type. We're going to struggle with anger. In terms of the passions, we get wrath, apparently.
Right.
So suck it, 8s. That wrath goes inward, as has been often said. But for sexual pairing ones, that wrath will go outward. And it can be just a rage at things not being right in the world.
Right.
That is, you can see how this works, both the desire to make the world better and to impact the world. Anger is an energy that can get stuff done.
Yeah.
And that's here.
Yeah, it's a tool, and it's part of that vibrancy, the intensity of connection. Like if you don't ever get angry, then this is one of the things that, like, I mentioned that my wife and I don't fight pretty regularly, and like there's this thing that is always part of that conversation that, like, if we don't fight, then there's something wrong.
Right.
And the sexual instinct is the one that says if there is never any strong enough feelings to cause anger to be expressed, then it's not deep enough.
Yep. So I've said this a handful of times that I grew up skiing. I lived 30 minutes outside of some of the best skiing in the world. So I know what it's like to go 70, 80 miles an hour. I am in control.
Right.
I'm very aware I'm in control. I have never crashed in a severe way. There's a measure of control there that's incredibly important to me. And if I lack control, I'm going to get really hurt. I feel almost the exact same way about my anger.
Yeah.
I'm generally in control. If I'm going to let anger out, it will be in a funneled way, a directed way, a laser-like way at things that I think I feel some moral justification about being angry about.
Right.
Unless I'm in a really unhealthy space. And TJ could probably recount 28 stories of my anger not being very directed.
I don't know that I'd get up to 28.
Spastic. But I think in their healthy space, ones can have that.
Yeah.
That kind of element.
Yeah.
I wanted to pair this lastly with idealism.
Yeah.
That the desire for impact and the idealism of ones easily overlap here. So
Yeah.
in terms of their affect, ones connect to the world by making it better, by trying to pull people into the better world. This, in an unhealthy place, can almost come across as a conquering mentality that we're going to go dominate, we're going to change things, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or says, we're doing what's right.
Right.
That can be a very negative way of being.
Yeah, that moral imperative can really turn things ugly quick.
Sometimes that can be the way that the world has changed. So if Gandhi takes on that perspective and says it doesn't matter, what's the quote? 20,000 British soldiers will not be able to retain 50 million Indians if those 50 million Indians decide not to cooperate.
Right.
That there's a moral justification. There's a we are going to dominate you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where thinking repression and wisdom really need to enter the picture for ones. Is wisdom needs to really be elevated as a primary for ones to ensure that you're making good choices if you're going to exercise this gear.
Right.
Because if you live in this gear, unfortunately, that's part of your personality.
Right. It can be a scorched earth kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, sometimes the institution needs to be burned down.
Mm-hmm.
But one's living in the sexual instincts can find that they set fires wherever they go.
Yep.
Sometimes those are good fires.
A lot of those who engage the sexual energy can set fires when they didn't need to be set.
Right.
But sometimes it is the case that this building needs to be destroyed so that we can build something else.
Right.
And then it's wisdom. So
Right.
just because Americans at one time cast off the shackles of a country doesn't mean that they need to do it every time.
Right.
It's not always the case that you rebel every single time. Like sometimes it's just not wise, kids.
And for the perspective of thinking specifically of the perspective of the one, like sometimes your belief about what needs to be changed, fixed, improved in the other person, in the world, and whatever, sometimes you were right. And sometimes you are imposing your perspective on someone else who doesn't see it that way.
Yeah. That needs to be known.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously, that can be a huge problem.
Right.
Lastly, on this is personal charisma and that charismatic side. I still think that Steve Jobs is a one, and I think that Steve Jobs exercises this gear. And if you read his biography, especially if you hear interviews with people who knew Steve Jobs, they always talk about how charismatic this man is in one-on-one settings, that he's going to sell you something.
Yeah.
And that use of charm that apparently he has is like just a dominant part of his personality.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to make things perfect. He wants to, in terms of his sphere, in terms of his business, like his perfectionism is all over Apple.
Right.
And he's selling it.
Thinking evolutionarily, like the part of this instinct, it comes from needing to attract a mate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, there has to be something about how you project yourself into the world that is attractive.
Right.
And so this pairing instinct is active in ones, their presence becomes magnetic. The way that they are talking can be revolutionary and inspiring. And like when you combine all of the things that we've talked about, like idealism plus the desire to improve plus like this really like self-assuredness that I know where things need to go, plus passion, plus this desire for deep connection. And when you combine all of those things, you get someone who potentially can be very attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not necessarily talking about like physically attractive. There's something beyond the physical attractiveness that is projected, that in order to draw people in and in order to inspire people, in order to give people hope or to encourage them to stand up to the British Empire. Like there is something about this kind of like leader that a lot of us want to be able to follow. Tim Cook is a great CEO for Apple, but he is not even a little bit as inspiring as Steve Jobs was. And also, Steve Jobs was also a notoriously jerky person,
Right.
if you were against him in any way.
Justifying his bad behavior based on ideals as well.
Right. And also, that dude knew how to sell a phone.
Have we talked about how great balance is when using the Enneagram?
A balance, you say? I'm not familiar with that word. Is that the thing that goes over the curtains?
As someone who engages this gear, let me elevate for the sake of all of us that balance is a great good, especially for those who are the sexual pairing ones out there. Which brings up the pairing twos. So I have my notes in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly everything just comes back to the desire for deep connection.
Okay.
Just over and over again. So one of the ways that we assembled our notes for this was we took like countless hours of interviews. We put them into a large language model and tried to kick out themes.
Yeah.
In order to find, what's really going on here. And I kept thinking, need for connection. This person is aggressive in pursuit. This person, that has boundary issues. This person wants intensity of relationships, very much about reading people. But everything kind of came down to twos in their sexual gear just are wired for deep connection and intimacy.
Yeah. And that can be in pursuit of your career goals. That can be in a desire to, provide for your financial stability, that for whatever thing you're aiming for. Like, this sexual energy can come out in a way that is like, I know that if I win that person, then I'm gonna get the thing that I want.
And it's not winning in the way that threes will, but it's the earning side, right?
Yep.
It's if I just do enough, then all the rest falls.
Yep. And that can be, this is the sexual energy that can be in a way that is drawing sexual attention to yourself. That can be in a way that is that can be in a way that is drawing people to yourself in a sexual kind of way. It can also be like at work. If I get my boss in my corner, then I'm going to get the next promotion.
The energy I want to highlight here, and it comes out for me in boundary issues. And that's not just in seeking a lover. This also can often come out in how one is advancing their helpfulness into the lives of others, that the two targets. That could be we often talk about kids on this front, but this clearly can be coworkers. This can be neighbors. This can be any number of folks in terms of the pairing energy coming out in terms of, I am here to be helpful.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a connection because I'm so helpful. You will notice the heat there. You'll notice the assertiveness, and on this front, the two is being vulnerable. Because the person in front of them may say, you know what, don't need your help today, thanks.
Right. And even talking about the emotional openness that comes with that deep connection, like there is the intensity of some of the most outwardly emotional people. Like, so twos are often like some of the most emotional types, and when you bring in this sexual energy, their emotional intensity gets bigger. And so then you have this desire for the deep connection, for more intensity with the other, but you're also now pairing that with this need to get and stay connected. So, but if I'm too much, then that'll push them away. And so I have to make sure that I'm presenting the right amount of intensity. And like, this is one of the places where risk is a big part of the calculation.
But if the two finds their person or their people and they are bringing intense gifts, it may be the case that the person that they've connected to is likewise just capable of kind of the endless supply of love and favors and, and gifts and the rest.
Right.
And I imagine that could be a wonderful relationship.
Right. I also was thinking about like terrible stage mothers, like the moms who want to live vicariously through the success of their child,
Sure.
Which, can be any type, but also there is this sort of caricature involved in the idea of stage moms that's all about like, I'm going to do everything in my power to help you become this thing for your own good. Stage moms is a great example of the two deciding for the other person what is good for them.
We didn't mention it with ones, but it may come up with some of the sexual subtypes in this gear, is that codependency may become a thing for sexual types.
Yeah.
For those who are living in this space, it's very common that like you might have your person and all your chips are on Fred, and
Yep.
And that may be great if it's just you and Fred against the world. It also can be the case that the codependency, it has negative. The codependency itself can have some negative elements. So.
Right. And the intensity of the pairing instinct can also become its own volatile source of problems with you and other people. Because if the two is, if Fred is a terrible person and all of the two's friends are saying, hey, Fred sucks, you need to move away from Fred, and the two is too tightly bound in that pairing space, then the two could come out swinging against anyone who has anything bad to say about Fred.
Yep.
Because that is their safety, that is their protection, that is the place where they know they are quote unquote loved because they have paired with Fred.
Yeah, I imagine twos in this space may be the ones who struggle most with breaking up. I think you're exactly right on that front. Or even with having a breakup that has occurred to them. Staying attached to someone who has left would also be a problem.
Sure.
The last thing was kind of this, that kind of comes out of this is struggling with boundaries. In the pursuit of deep connection, you can just eliminate the boundaries.
Right.
Self-care is already going to be a challenge for twos.
Right.
And maybe for some of the other types. And so if you're in this gear as a two, self-care may be tricky.
Well, and thinking about self-care, particularly on the heels of talking about codependence, twos struggle with this in general, but particularly when the sexual instinct is active, they want to remove all possible obstacles to the relationship. To growing and deepening, and like you don't want hurdles in the way of trying to get someone to come to run to you, right? So twos will remove those hurdles, sometimes to their own detriment.
Right.
Like they don't want to have boundaries because they're trying to draw other people toward themselves so that they feel loved and connected and protected and provided for. And if there are hurdles, that's problematic, right?
To build on that, so much of the emotional intelligence that twos have is just going outward, and that's their radar. And sometimes it's hard to look at yourself and what you need and serving yourself and making sure that things are shored up, especially if your energy is directed at, I need to pair with other people to get my needs fulfilled.
Right. And this is one of the places, like thinking about pride as the thing that is like the big stumbling block for twos. Like Beatrice Chestnut uses the word seduction in talking about twos that are in the sexual instinct. And I like that idea of wanting so much to make yourself not presentable, but alluring to draw other people toward you in a seductive kind of way. That can be sexual, romantic, but it can also be that sense of like Steve Jobs is seductive.
Yeah.
He tricked the world into buying into a closed ecosystem, and it worked. I'm on board. It makes sense to me. But that seduction, there is a certain amount of certainty of your own specialness, of your own.
Yeah.
Certainty is the wrong word. Like that pride is the thing that fuels that seduction.
Yeah. And there's the desire for the security move there in terms of exclusivity. The two who, really feels the security move when they go into 4 of wanting to be unique is, that very much may materialize here.
Right.
I like that in terms of, because if I'm just a helper, there's countless helpers.
Right.
But if I'm your special person, it's different. If I have a closed ecosystem, if you are buying into my thing, and I'm and I'm the channel, I'm irreplaceable.
Yep.
That I can see being, something that twos could position themselves to be irreplaceable.
Right. Right.
Bang. I think that's a good hitting of that image of charisma and charm. Another one of those big elements for sexual gear is risk, and we've kind of hinted a bunch at the emotional vulnerability here. But again, the assertiveness, boldness, I suppose we've talked about that as well. It really overlaps with the twos for me in terms of deep connection and risk. I mean, it's just, this is the energy coming out from two space.
There's a the sort of caricature understanding of the helper, the provider, the whatever we say about twos at sort of the surface level, and especially thinking about the way that a lot of particularly women who were raised in a certain type of religion were trained to be this sort of like docile servant, right? And this is the other side of
this is a different
that, all of that, the like pride and desire for intensity and intimacy, like all of those things, boldness, like there is risk to being a helper in front of people as opposed to behind the scenes. There is risk to putting yourself out there in a way that draws people to you. There is a need for a certain amount of boldness to see someone from across the room and know, I want that person to ask me to dance. Yeah.
Supposed to even like shift it back on the intensity side. It's quite risky to be the one who welcomes other people, but oftentimes like twos putting themselves out in that space of, you're new here, let me welcome you and show you around. Like that in itself is risky, and it may be this gear.
Right.
It's again the case. It's very seldom like that I can think of places where people pursue me to apologize to me first. I normally am the one apologizing to other people first.
It's risky. But there again, like the two doesn't see that necessarily, the like a pairing two doesn't necessarily naturally see the risk in the same way that we see the risk there. Because the risk, the higher risk of sending that email is that if I don't repair this, then I've lost that connection.
Yeah.
And I also think that twos really struggle with like thinking about risk and particularly thinking about this, like this pairing idea that there is a lot of risk involved in the authenticity that twos bring to the table, because they don't want to put forward some type of image or fake thing, because that is risky to not have your full self there. Because if people are on board for something that's not real and then they see the thing that is real later, there's a better chance that they're going to leave, right? So you have to present enough of yourself that is true for people to be drawn into what you believe is true about yourself, but not so much that it pushes people away. So there's this like calculation involved in those risks, in the being authentic.
Yeah.
That like twos are always writing that line, because if I give too much, then I am too much and I'll be rejected.
Right. The target here is probably important. This energy isn't coming out for everybody.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
This is not about attracting the group.
right.
This is about attracting the person.
Right. And I'm looking at Tyler Zach's notes on this, which were real helpful. I was curious about your thoughts on this. He says, this too is more of a lover than a helper. Humorously, this subtype has been associated with the dangerous beauty of a vampire consuming another person with their engulfing love. As you were talking, that's just what came to my mind. I don't know if that holds. I think he's borrowing some of that from Chestnut, who really wants to emphasize the femme fatale side of twos.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You got any thoughts on that?
I get that. Now I just want to argue about the technicalities of vampires, but that will get us nowhere. So, I think that the idea of like the consumption, the intensity of that kind of relationship is I think that's a good metaphor to communicate that. Like there is a desire for so much intensity that I can actually feed off of you. And that's part of what twos are getting out of relationships is they feel that the fact of the connection is the goal.
I think that's right. So really important point. And as we've been talking, I keep wanting to apologize for how intense this is coming out as a critique. And I suppose the one stuff came out kind of as a critique. I never get really emails and had a person send me, you were real hard on the threes in the self-pres section. I was like, I don't even remember what I said about the threes. But I think it's the case that if you go hard into your instinct, some of your worst self can come out in these places.
Sure.
And so again, contrary to some, when TJ and I elevate balance as a real virtue, and to say the subtypes is probably a bad way to think of yourself for this reason. It's like you need to balance these energies because when they get all the power, you might not, I don't know how you avoid some of the negatives that may materialize here. So,
right. Well, and a lot of our whole conversation, like the big picture conversation about this instinct, there's so much more emotionality involved in this one.
Yeah.
Right. And when we are talking about twos, threes, and fours who are in the heart triad anyway, and this is part of how they understand themselves and the world around them is through the emotional connections they have with other people, you get into the sexual instinct and it just goes further. And that's
right.
We're not saying this is a terrible thing. We're not saying this is always off-putting. We're saying that if you are unaware of how this instinct pushes you into other people's lives, then you might be doing some damage.
Right.
You might have found the perfect partner who can take that intensity, and that's good, and you should. And we love and support that. And also, if you've always struggled to find a partner, this may be part of what needs to be examined.
Building on that, like some of the best expressions of this for twos are going to look like severe collaboration and partnership. A lot of loyalty, lot of how can I advance the thing, that you're interested in, and here's what I need in return. And that, for some of us, that person can be just a treasure.
Yeah.
Bang. Twos, love you twos. I feel harsh on that, so my apologies. But there's lots of positive things here, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
to just know that was more the criticism or trying to expose some of the pitfalls, I suppose.
And just for anyone keeping score at home, that is a great example of the sexual pairing energy coming out of a 1.
That's right.
The need to apologize ahead of time.
To our dear listener, who I have a personal relationship with.
In case you are misunderstanding my intentions, I want to put my intentions out there so that you know.
If I was being defensive, I'd say, well, rewind the tape to the sexual ones who I said might burn down the world for their ideals, which is slightly worse.
Right. Yeah.
Pairing 3s. All right, 3s. The deep connection, again, is here. There is... the pairing 3s, the sexual 3s, it's a different kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
I do recognize that the self-preserving gear is seen as the counter type. I didn't make up this list, but the sexual gear, I think, has a run in my mind because here's the thing: when 3s are in pairing sexual space, they're not going for the attention of everybody. They're going for the attention of her. They're going for the attention of him.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that becomes very, it's very directed in nature.
Right.
And I find this interesting. So you got thoughts on 3s looking for deep connection and intimacy?
Yeah, I think that there's at the core, 3s are looking to be praiseworthy, be worthwhile, be excellent, and avoid any kind of appearance of failure, right? And so when the sexual instinct is active, when they are pointing their energy at another person, it is entirely possible that their goal is to accomplish this one thing. And that could be sex. That could be a successful marriage. That could be a business partnership. That could be at the worst, their attraction can be about drawing someone in so that they have this tool in order to help them get ahead. There is something about partnering with someone who is going to offer them something for the sake of their own success in whatever they're doing.
There was in the Art of Growth panel, if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to some of the panels of the Art of Growth, fantastic. It's a podcast or a set of podcasts, but they have a podcast just for 3s. And in the sexual panel, nearly everyone on the panel said that they were the sort of people who had lots and lots of boyfriend, girlfriends as they were growing up. It's kind of an early obsession with pairing and being affectionate and getting the sort of attention from a singular person that they craved.
Right.
And when that attention had been exhausted, you break up with them, you find the next person.
Right.
And it was it was very serial in nature.
Mm-hmm. Anyone who's been in a long-term relationship ever in their life, that there are sort of seasons like that, that honeymoon phase. The very beginning of the relationship is lots of big energy, lots of intensity, lots of things happening, learning all kinds of stuff about each other. And eventually you sort of settle into a little bit of a routine. You settle into normal, stable, hopefully. There's no spark there. And there's countless books and therapists and movies and things about a married couple trying to figure out how to get the spark back, right?
Sure.
And this is one of the things that for 3s equates to failure. If there is no spark anymore, then your relationship isn't working.
Yep. And
that, whether it's business partners or an actual marriage or sexual relationship, when the spark is gone, we need to either aggressively fix this problem or move on.
I think that's exactly right. It comes from motive. It's the motive paired with the pairing gear means I need we've talked about temperatures being a real, sign of each of these instincts. So the hotness that comes with pairing sexual energy, it's the heat needs to be maintained,
Right.
if you're going to live in that gear. So
Right.
they're like, and I think this happens to be just who I was really attracted to as I was growing up. It was mostly 7s and 3s, and 7s and 3s can discard you like so fast. Yep. And like so many relationships I had with girls growing up were of that sort. That was just like, oh, I guess things are done, and just moving on. And that comes out, I think, here. I think you're saying the reasoning correctly.
Right. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. A healthy, self-aware 3 who is leaning on that sexual instinct for a specific purpose can probably communicate a lot of that as well, and bring that into the intense burst of their relationship, saying, hey, this thing is going to be fire for half an hour and then we're going to leave and go our separate ways. And it's like that can be the self-awareness. There is the part that is
there will be
important.
Lots of image maintenance throughout. And even in the breakup there will be a
Well, I think that like thinking about this is the center of the heart triad, and we're talking about an instinct that is about connection and other people and relationship. And so when you get into this space, like 3s need to be admired, right? And 3s in this pairing instinct need it so much more, like that they need that attention, that admiration, that other people seeing them and being drawn into them. They need that intensity. And when the relationship gets to a place where that intensity isn't there anymore, then it's that, this is the attachment detachment group. They can move on.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. Yeah, it's the affect. Mm-hmm. There is a relational manipulation that can come out in these 3s where they are building relationships quickly and for the purpose of gaining the attention. And that's, I suppose, what I'm trying to... And this doesn't just have to be between lovers. I think my language has gone down that road. This can be, obviously, across the board. But their charm, social skills are seeking to achieve whatever their goal happens to be. And maybe their goal has nothing to do with, romantic connection. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes 3s of this sort can captivate, woo, win, use up, and as you were saying, discard once the energy isn't there, once the desired thing isn't there, once the goal has either been, checkmarked or didn't get realized. We're just not hot anymore.
Right.
We're moving on.
Right. I have a fair amount of 3 friends, and I'm thinking of one in particular that really struggles with any kind of lukewarm relationship. Mm-hmm. Purportedly not a highly sexual instinct person, but still, when things sort of calm down in relationship, there's an unease that can even sometimes be so intense that it's they don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with that missing intensity, that lack of deep connection that is for a purpose, right? So normal maintenance of relationship is really problematic sometimes for 3s in this sexual instinct.
Yeah.
Because that normalness is there's no spark there. But, that's still a thing that all of us have to deal with.
It's also the case that, how would this work? If you're having to fix a problem and it's just me and you, there's the emotional vulnerability. Yep. And 3s don't want to look like failures. And so if we're having to fix things, there may be a different solution. And it's just okay, let's just wash our hands of this, go our separate ways. And we don't have to spend any time on that.
Right. But the on the other side of that, the risk of being emotionally vulnerable in order to draw someone else to you, to have it can be winning to have navigated a difficult situation in a relationship, right?
Sure.
Like I'm thinking of like maybe the 3 who had a spouse that after 20 years cheated on them.
Yep.
It can be the case that 3 looks at that situation and says the most successful version of like the most successful ending of this is us coming back together.
Agreed. Yep. I think that's a good call. Yeah. And they won't tell that story till 5 years later.
Right. When it's all resolved.
Repaired and we're rolling. So the last thing I had on connection and intimacy is, and this was something that pinged for the Art of Growth group, was their chameleon-like adaptability. That is, when the 3 is in one-on-one conversations, they can tell whatever story they want about what they believe, what their intentions are, what they are pursuing. So, you know, you like in the political sphere, you meet a guy with a certain T-shirt on, and you say, "Oh, you know, here I'm going to connect with you by talking about your T-shirt and how I too share these things." And then you see another person who has the, you know, the opposite side of the T-shirt, and you say, "Oh, hey," and say something about yourself that connects with the person regarding their shirt. And it's I can massage the truth in order to create the connection.
Right.
And
because
it's in these compartmentalized spaces is the big thing. Is since these 2 people will never meet each other and never talk about me, I can paint things however I wish and then juggle those balls.
Right. Because the appearance and the connection is the important thing.
So looking for the connection, looking for the intimacy, trying to get into those spaces, and then whatever your goal is in that moment, that just is. So we've talked about the passions a handful of times. This is where deceit can live for 3s for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation about the mask that 3s put on, the thing that they wear. So like you walk into a room of this type of person and you put on the mask that makes you look exactly like them.
Yep.
And then you leave that room and you take off the mask, and then you walk into a different room where there's these other people and you put on a mask that looks exactly like them, right?
Yep. And
this can be a very dangerous place for sexual 3s to reside. But tying, like, I think mature and wise and healthy 3s can recognize that they are actually highlighting a part of themselves. Like when they tap into their authentic selves,
right.
And that desire for pairing comes for that instinct comes forward, this can actually be a really, really valuable and good and beautiful way that a 3 can highlight different aspects of themselves.
Yep. That moving on to risk, that's exactly where authenticity can live for 3s. Is in this space, in this gear.
Yeah.
When you actually do pursue, emotional deep connection with another person, it's very hard to live superficially. It's really hard to live in a deceptive space.
Right.
You know, your authentic self is going to come out because they're going to see it, and you're going to need to reveal more things, and you can't lie all day long, as it were.
Right.
You know, the authenticity over image is gonna emerge.
Right.
And for some, especially, I suppose 3s to go a step further, who are feeling repressed type, the emotional vulnerability is also going to be something here.
Because emotions can be messy
and are even required.
Yeah.
To have this sort of connection. So this is actually a balancing place. And I suppose this is why I'm more inclined to think, I wonder if 3 wouldn't be a great example of a countertype, because I feel like a lot of the balancing, countertypes end up having a lot of the balancing places for the types. And so I'm not going to argue with anyone on this, because I couldn't even define countertype till yesterday. So, but I think there's something there.
Well, I think that sort of moves us, really pulls in that idea of impact, because the center of the heart types, it's often the case that like the impact that they want to have in that sexual instinct is the connection, the relationship. The impact that is important is some kind of spark between us. We are both changed by just interacting with each other in an intense kind of way.
Yep. That impact is good on that front. And on the negative front, this is kind of where, again, the emotional manipulation can live.
Yeah.
So I'm pushing the individual into the forms and places that I want them to go.
Yeah.
There's another thing that often happens with threes, and it's the attachment side of like my good, my success is your good, your success. Like we merge. The merging that can take place in attachment types for threes, I think, is here. And so there are sometimes that threes are actually the cheerleader. They're not the person on stage.
Sure.
They're the one who's elevating, and their desire for impact comes through, I have bonded myself to this successful person, and I'm trying to get them to succeed.
Right.
So I know nothing about this person. This is all speculation, but I think it's the case that Abraham Lincoln's wife was this sort of person. She's never going to run for president, but she married the guy who could run for president, and all of her energy is very, image conscious and political, and they end up being this great pairing in which he rises to power.
And there's a lot to be said about being the model politician's wife, right? Yeah. Especially at that time period. There is something about being really good in your supporting role that is also really successful.
Spot on. Did we talk about charm?
We didn't, but this is to me, this is one of the places where threes are full of charm anyway, like threes and sevens. The sexual instinct, it just makes something that's already really good better.
I suppose it would be more. This was similar to twos. It's like threes don't flirt with everybody.
Yeah.
But that, I suppose, is what goes through my mind is and again, this doesn't have to be romantic in nature, but there's shifting into that gear of I'm elevating the charm offensive. Flirtation is a good word that can live in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's winning people to your side in order to achieve your goals.
Yes.
Requires some charisma. Yeah. And this is I'm talking, we didn't talk that much about deception, but deceit, but like this is one of the things that you could be a total failure and a terrible person, and if you're really good at this part of your sexual instincts, you may be able to convince the world that you are the best.
Yeah. Let me think about that for a second. When you brought up winning, I was like, yes, competition emerges here.
Yep.
But the
goal is to win.
There might be a difference between the social winning and the bonding sexual winning. So with flirtation, I'm winning this person.
Yes.
And the rest of the world be damned.
Yeah.
On the social or even the self-pres winning, it looks like I can use up people for my purposes as long as I'm holding the trophy at the end. I didn't come here to make friends.
Right.
But occasionally threes can shift into this gear in order to advance their purposes.
Right.
If they live in this gear, then it probably will be the case that they have just much more of a singular target of this person thinks the world of me. I suppose in the workforce, you have a boss who is a high achiever, very well regarded.
Yeah.
And your singular energy as a three is I need to win their interest in terms of how I do things.
Yeah.
It would be that sort.
Well, and I'm thinking of like the other side of that, the boss that's the three in that same scenario has a lot of skill in convincing other people to make him look good.
Yeah. And probably has a need. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the millionaire who doesn't know how to dress himself.
Yeah.
You know, I go to this hairstylist and this hairstylist gets very enthused about making me look good. Or I have a body man.
Yeah.
Here's your suit. You're going to look amazing. And I was like, that's fantastic. This is apparently Italian. I know nothing about Italy, but I sure look good. You know, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, we can flip it over to the fours. Pairing sexual fours. Got anything that comes to mind immediately on this year for fours?
You remember Dexter?
I do.
Lila is a perfect image of a deeply unhealthy sexual four.
Okay. Yeah, going with the famous ones.
I love Lila so much.
I had this conversation with a friend of ours, and I said how much I liked Lila also, and she was like,
yeah,
just disgusted that I would like this character.
The worst. And I think she is such a compelling villain because, like, she is so certain of her own specialness.
Yeah.
She is so certain of his specialness that she will literally burn the world down in order to draw him to her.
It's a good example. If you don't know what we're talking about, go watch the first and second season of Dexter. It's fantastic.
Lila is so great.
Intensity is there. Pulling this person into their romantic vision of the two of them. The deep connection is coming from the ambitions and again the romantic fantasies of this person, probably in a connected relationship. That's where intimacy is going to be had. And it's hot.
We find ourselves talking about another idealist and still like deeply rooted in that heart triad, and like there is like this, the idealism here is about emotional relation and intensity and attractiveness and sentimentality and all of the things that are about that heart center. Like there should be intense feeling, intense experiences that have to do with this, the way that we are related to other people.
Yeah. Where the 3 is getting invited into authenticity, the 4 lives in authenticity and truth-telling, vulnerability. You know, those are going to be just magnified by this gear. This is how we are going to connect.
So this is also the type of 4 that is like 4s living in being in this pairing instinct. They're probably going to be more outwardly expressive of the bigness of their emotions.
Especially because they're going to choose their target.
Right.
If you have a sexual, instinct that's dominant, then when you unveil yourself, it will be to the person.
Right.
And so that's why it will feel like it's, the too muchedness probably comes out. Spades here. And it's probably going to be singular.
And so much of that is about like trying to find someone who not only gets and accepts my intensity, but can match it as well, right? So like 4s looking to be seen and understood, like they feel like nobody really quite gets them. The sexual instinct, this pairing desire, propels them to like find that special one, that special other that will get them, that will match, that will be able to withstand the intensity that they bring to the world.
And that can obviously, again, doesn't have to happen just in romance. This clearly happens in friendships and the rest.
Right.
And 4s who are looking for somebody to just understand them. This could be the relationship a 4 has with their therapist, or we have one of our close friends. I would assume has a high gear here in terms of this person will commonly text just a single individual the thing that's on their heart that is oftentimes quite dramatic, and we're going to work through that. Yeah. But it's not a group text.
Right. Well, and I think that like Chestnut calls this competition.
Yeah.
Because these types that passion of envy, like the like I don't have what that other person has, like that their energy often gets that envy gets funneled into a sense of competition, a sense of instead of wallowing in what I'm missing, I'm gonna show that in these other ways I'm better than that person.
Yep.
Like I'm gonna win something in order. Like it's a turning up of the intensity that is already present in fours.
I suppose to jump to the end, the charisma and charm might come out there in terms of how fours might express that. Like this is where they're gonna hit that gear where they're trying to win.
Right.
And we'll part of that's going to be, I don't know if charm's the right word here for fours, but it's going to be definitely the wooing somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the positive side, the deep connection and intimacy, some of these, like fours in this gear, can be a treasure to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Who just have natural heart level intensity, who will, like, you are struggling and let's go there, and deal with this. And they are present and they are available, and just have that gear to deal with some stuff.
Yeah. This is a concept that we talk about a lot when we talk about fours, but like they don't need to fix anything. And especially when we're talking about this sexual instinct, like the intensity even of bad feelings, of grief, of whatever things, the intensity is the goal. So fixing it is not part of the equation for fours. And fours in the pairing instinct, it's fine with them to sit in the problems, to sift through the muck and
Right.
cover themselves in ashes and just be there. Like that is not something that they need to fix, because they crave the fact of whatever is actually happening.
Yep. There's the positive. I wrote this down, and it's kind of the challenge that some fours will be healing from what they perceive as past trauma, or maybe in fact past trauma. And so I want to bring in the idea of risk here. The risk that I think that this gear invites is, I'm going to deal with all the stuff in my past, all the people in my past, because they are so vibrant in my mind of the bad things that had happened. And that's risky to have those sorts of personal journeys into that space.
Sure.
That also can be a space that you end up getting stuck in.
Right.
If you're not able to actually process that in a healthy place. But I think for a lot of us, like, I feel this, like, there's all sorts of conversations that I don't want to have. I probably am not going to have with people I care about, because the risk actually for me in those is actually too much.
Yeah. Well, I think, but hand in hand with that, like a different aspect of risk is the aversion to stagnation. Like there is a level of sort of jumping to the next thing that exists here more than it does in the other two instincts.
Yeah.
Because they, like, when things normalize, then they're not intense anymore. And so like at the drop of a hat, fours can, like, I remember listening to those the Art of Growth interviews with the sexual fours, and like several of them have moved around a lot in their lives because they get used to a place, and then it's too normal, so they have to move.
Yeah.
Again, we see, those of us on the outside of this see this as risk, and the four sees a stillness that is not desired.
So you're saying, like, dealing with past issues actually is the forward movement in that situation.
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't want to confront any of the past harms that have happened to me in my life, because, conflict is dumb, and it's much easier just sweep it under the rug. We're already where we are, and it's okay if nothing changes.
Right.
But fours desiring that intensity, desiring authenticity, like this is a big part of fours naturally, just part of who they are. They want to be authentic to how they feel in the moment. Then you bring in this sexual energy, this pairing instinct, and it says, like, dive head first into emotionally fraught situations.
Yeah.
Because there's a beauty and a realness in that in and of itself. Even if you don't fix the problem, being in the reality of the situation is good.
There's also here's what part of their coping style. They're part of the emotional response triad, and so pushing for engagement. And that I suppose that goes alongside that third big idea that the desire for impact in a relationship really comes out in this type in terms of, I mean, twofold. There's when fours can externalize their suffering, the complaints that may come forth, the demands that may come forth. Fours in this space, I think, can vocalize their needs. Yeah, and that, again, quote unquote, like the too muchedness, I associate with some of that, and the quote unquote the drama that may emerge is in these spaces, but especially in one-on-one space.
Yeah, and the as is part of fourness, like there's a like putting this energy out there to draw people in, and when, like, it can also be the case that, like, when they come in and it's not what they wanted, they push them away.
Yeah.
Like there's an intensity in that in and of itself. And also, like, the desire for that emotional bond that like can often be very idealistic of like the soulmate level connection of meeting someone and all of a sudden, like, we're already finishing each other's sentences because we just get each other. Like, there's an idealism for that thing.
Well, it's that the relationship itself needs to have a base and reality, and it needs to get tested, apparently.
Yeah.
And if it's real, this one-on-one connection, it will survive all of the energy, the emotional, truth-telling, and the honesty of feelings that are thrown forth.
Yeah. And I want to make a little bit of special mention to, like, fours are in the heart triad, and connection and relation and, like, other people's feelings are part of their world. And also, this is one of the places where fours can become, their focus can become narrowly pointed at themselves in using this desire for intensity and truth-telling in a way that says, I need to speak my truth, and it doesn't matter if it hurts you.
Yeah, because motive, they want to be seen, they want to be understood, they want to be acknowledged, and they're in this gear, they're going to get that by being vocal,
right?
Especially with the individual, if they can get them in that space where it's like, now I want you to see me.
And even in particularly unhealthy spaces, there can be an attitude behind it of, if you can't handle my truth, then you don't deserve it anyway.
Right.
And that, again, ties back into this push-pull kind of thing, wanting to draw people in, and when they get close, you push them away. This can be part of it.
On the flip side, because that's what is expected by the four, oftentimes they are willing to have the opposite go on in their life. When someone needs severe empathy, that's a place they can easily shift into that space.
Right.
Especially as a connecting point, and especially when I'm talking about wooing somebody, that may be the real entry point, is I'm going to do my best to understand you. I'm going to spend a lot of time with that upfront investment and show you how it's done. And then when I shift into, now you need to understand me, now there's a tit for tat, there's reciprocation. And that's kind of how it's not charm, it's wooing.
Yeah. If you ever like meet someone who skips the small talk and asks you a really intense personal question about your childhood, like there are people like that in the world. They could be sevens who are just looking for like more stories, but there's a good chance that the desire for a deep connection in this moment comes from the sexual instinct of the 4.
Yeah, right. And especially in certain kinds of atmospheres, like you could imagine like a round table therapy session in which,
Right.
like that's what we're here for, kids. And
Right.
maybe the 4 takes that job, especially because they can set up that atmosphere and really get into that sort of thing. That might actually, in fact, be a great, gig.
Right.
Or I have just since I used to work in ministry, a lot of the folks who are doing music want to have, come out of that 4 space.
Sure. Yeah.
Because when they come to, okay, here's the corporate event, what do I have to offer? Well, what I can offer is pushing people into their most, significant emotions when it comes to connecting with each other and with God.
Right.
Bang. Got anything else on 4s?
We didn't talk much about the charisma and charm. And I think that there is a way that 4s present themselves to the world that requires them to be true to themselves, right? But also, especially when they are activating that sexual instinct, there is a way that 4s can navigate, the image that they are putting forward, the version of themselves that they are putting forward is naturally, like, romantic perceptions draw people in, and they especially draw the right people in, right? And so there is something about how you are presenting yourself from that sexual energy that is basically like you're raising a flag trying to get all the people who know what that flag means to come to you. Like it's a bug zapper in the cool summer nights. Like it's there's this projection of your own specialness, your own the way that you are interesting and are different and dare I say superior to the schmoes that are around, all the normies that are around you, that when the right people see that, they will come to you.
I hadn't had a person in mind for this until you started talking, and then the person that came to my mind is somebody we spent a lot of time on, and it's Prince. Prince seems like a great, 4 who probably has a dominant sexual instinct, and charm isn't what I would say about Prince, but that compelling
allure.
Yeah, there's a better word.
It's allure.
Compelling charisma.
Yeah.
That's where it's at its highest, is in a personality like that. Yep. But it's not charming somebody into connection. It is I'm presenting myself.
Yep.
With an alluring power.
Yeah. It's not the kind of charm that wins a room. It's the kind of charm that wins the right people in the room.
Yeah. And that's, again, going to be for all the hard types, they are targeting on that front.
Yep.
So I want this person's attention would be the move.
I think this is, I literally just now thought of this, so there's nothing to back it up. But like Andy Kaufman, as an entertainer,
sure,
the thing that he is bringing to the table is wildly off-putting to the vast majority of people, and he likes it that way.
Sure.
Because that part of it was because he was being true to himself, and part of it is that he can. It's so much easier for him to sift through all the people who just don't get it,
right?
Because of the way and the people who do get it
are the right people.
And it's not just that, but like it's entirely off-putting to everyone else, but it's charming to the people who get it.
Yeah, Bill Murray gives a speech in Tootsie where he's a playwright. He's like, a lot of people want their opening night to be filled and packed. I want it to rain. And I want only 3 people spread out.
Yeah.
And I want them to get up at the end and clap. That's what I'm in it for.
Yeah.
Something like that. Delightful. Good work. That's what I got. You got anything else?
No, not on these.
Friends, it mean the world to us if you would share this episode with somebody you love, preferably somebody who's into Enneagram, and it's time to take a next step. This ends up our stuff. We have started getting feedback. I keep talking about how nobody gives us feedback. Actually, we're getting feedback a little bit more regularly now, and perhaps rightly so. Some folks are questioning the 5-year rule of weighing.
Oh, so now we're getting the wrong feedback.
So we're getting folks, and perhaps this is rightly so, saying, you know what, I didn't type myself correctly until I got into Instincts. And so and my response was, that wasn't your job. That was the teacher's job. The teacher needs to know about the instincts. You should focus on the core things about the Enneagram and live in them for 5 years before you jump into this material. But you got thoughts on that?
I mean, my initial less tactful response to that was like, well, yeah, that's because subtypes takes 5 years. Instincts, I feel like you could start anytime, but subtypes, that is one of the things that I'm hoping that we're going to get out of our work on this is that, like, for the most part, instincts, subtypes, etc., is messy, muddy, makes things very complicated very quickly.
Right.
And then there are a handful of types where if you don't do the work of learning about these instincts, you're not going to get there.
Right.
The sexual instinct coming out of one looks so different that I have been a part of, and this is not nearly all of them. I have been a part of several conversations where people were trying to convince Jeff that he was not a 1.
Right.
And there have been so many more that I wasn't even a part of because the way that the sexual instinct comes out flavors the oneness in a certain kind of direction, right? And so I think there are a lot of people where this is really necessary to get into, like, where is that base motivation coming from? Because my behavior looks so much different from other 1s or 7s or whatever. I hope that some of that can be drawn out from the work that we're doing.
Yeah. I think it's a challenge for me in terms of, I suppose I'm not working with anyone, so I suppose it's not really a challenge, but for those who are doing Enneagram work, who are in a therapeutic setting or leading others, then knowing about the instincts, maybe you should wait 5 years before you're doing it in a therapeutic setting, right. And you should familiarize yourself with the instincts so that when typing, that might be part of the conversation. Because I think if it were the case that somebody was radically thrown off by how their type is spoken about because of their dominant instinct, then the teacher should be able to step in and say, here's what you ought to focus on, given the fact that you just end up having a unique entry point into your motive. So I suppose I thought that was fun. Well, we're going to spend just a couple more weeks on instincts, and if you've gotten this far, I hope you're enjoying it. We're going to do a deep dive we're going to do interviews through the fall, and I'm really excited for all the folks that we have in the lineup. As always, if you want to connect with us, you can find us at aroundthecircle.org. We continue to meet once a month on Zoom. Would love to have you. It's very easy to sign up. And music by The Collection and Brian Claxton. And he's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. And who you aren't just isn't interesting.